Here's a guy who wants you to prove that God does not exist.
I love that every single day I see somebody advocating the word of God because it sets a fire in my heart.
I'm not gonna lie, God has saved my life. I'm done with my atheist phase.
Give me a hug. You have a great day, okay?
Take care. It's actually just respectful, loving conversations.
That's what
Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. All right, please. That was a dramatic entrance. What was that?
Oh, I said the onus isn't on me.
Okay. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, you say God exists, prove you wrong, but God exists is a what's the word? A positive statement.
Good.
It's not my responsibility to prove that God doesn't exist. It's your responsibility to prove that God does exist.
I love your answer. Except that is an enormous error that is often made, because the rule of thumb across every single discipline of science, across the entire world of rationality and logic, is that a thing cannot cause itself necessarily.
I, as an atheist, am not claiming that anything causes itself. For example, I no more believe that the universe caused itself to exist than theists believe that God caused himself to exist.
You need something outside of the thing caused to cause it. Time cannot cause itself.
Nor can anything else cause time. You can't cause something to exist at a time when it already exists, and obviously there was never a time when time didn't already exist.
Space cannot cause itself. Materials cannot cause themselves. Matter cannot cause itself. Energy cannot cause itself.
Nor can anything else cause energy to exist. That's also a well-demonstrated scientific fact. There's even a law of physics that says that nothing can cause energy to exist.
You need something that is extremely powerful outside of energy, outside of time, therefore timeless, outside of matter, therefore immaterial, to cause it.
What does it even mean to say that something exists outside of time? What's the difference between saying that something exists outside of time and saying that it never exists? Because as far as I can tell, those mean the exact same thing.
So are you defining God as like the universal
cause
creator?
of the Holy Quran, and this is what Islam has been saying for 1400 years, defines God not as a bearded man in the sky, but as the cause of all causes.
The cause of all causes would be a cause of itself. Didn't you earlier say that a thing cannot cause itself? If a thing cannot be a cause of itself, then at best, God can only be a cause of all causes except himself, rather than the cause of absolutely all causes.
The initial cause. And Islam has never had any issue with science. In fact, has made many astonishing positive statements regarding science. And that is why we're out here saying, hey, if the concept of God that the Holy Quran talks about is completely compatible with and supported by human reason and our scientific understanding of the universe, then why not take a moment to investigate that?
Well, the Abrahamic concept of God is not compatible with all human reason. It's a self-contradictory notion. To say that something exists is to say that it has location in space-time. To say that something exists outside of space-time is to say that it exists nowhere and never. There, I just proved that there's no God, by definition.
So the onus is actually on the atheist to show me a single particle in the universe that caused itself. That doesn't exist.
I don't know of any particles that cause themselves to exist, but every particle we know about was caused to exist by physical energy and the fundamental forces, not by God.
I mean, I don't think that's like, because
But by the exact same logic that you just presented, the onus is on the atheist.
The onus is only ever on the person trying to do the convincing. Atheists who have no interest in converting other people to be atheists have no burden of proof because they're not trying to prove anything. They don't have to justify their own atheism.
Yes, it's an...
No, see, okay.
If I'm talking about a phantasmagorical, magical God that is inconsistent with a lot of science, you're absolutely right. The onus is on me to show that there's a unicorn out there.
A unicorn would be far less phantasmagorical than a being which exists independent of space and time, because a unicorn is not a self-contradictory notion.
I'm just saying, I think I disagree with the definition of God you're presenting, because of course I can agree that...
So you don't think that there was a cause of all causes?
Not if it's true that a thing cannot cause itself, because a cause of all causes would, by definition, be a cause of itself.
I don't think we know anything about the cause of all causes beyond that it was the cause of all causes. I don't think
But we know that there was a cause of all causes, therefore that cause exists.
If it's true that a thing cannot cause itself, we actually know that there is not and cannot coherently be a cause of all causes. Maybe what this guy has in mind is the first cause rather than the cause of all causes. As best we can tell, well, the first cause, the causeless cause, is the universe itself. The universe, because it's the space-time continuum, cannot have a cause. Time cannot be caused to exist because you can't cause something to exist at a time when it already exists. And there was never a time when time didn't already exist. You can only cause something to exist before the first moment that it exists. Since it would be a contradiction to say that there was a moment before time existed, the space-time continuum cannot have a cause. It is, therefore, the causeless cause.
I'm not saying that God or that cause doesn't exist. I'm just saying, like,
But that's the definition of God in the Holy Quran.
If the definition of God in the Quran is that God is a cause of all causes, then that God is a self-contradictory notion. If what is meant by cause of all causes is really first cause, or the uncaused cause, then that's the universe, and Muslims must therefore be pantheists.
Well, maybe your definition of God, but there's like dozens of definitions of God.
Yeah.
But if the task is to prove that God exists, you're not proving him wrong.
Well,
The other thing is, you said that the onus is on me to demonstrate that God does exist. I provided a clear definition of what God is, and you just admitted that that cause does exist.
You said that God exists outside of time. That's the very opposite of clear. It's utterly nonsensical.
if that's your definition of God, then I can't refute that, obviously. I'm just saying I don't think...
But doesn't humility and fairness demand that you acknowledge that that cause does exist?
Well, I can't admit that a cause of all causes exists, because such a thing would be a cause of itself, and we both agree that a thing cannot cause itself.
Yeah, no, I just did though. But beyond, again, it's a matter of definitions here, right? Like, what else are you saying?
But that's the most important part of this discussion. With due respect, is like, what are you talking about? And if what I'm talking about is an incontrovertible fact of the universe, and probably the incontrovertible fact of the universe,
Self-contradictory statements are literally the most controvertible.
That's doing a lot of heavy lifting here for the rest of, because what are the implications if I accept that God exists in this ground?
That's a really good question.
Because of course I can't contest that. Like, what you said is irrefutable about the nature of causes, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
I just refuted it, though.
But beyond that, right? It's like a matter of like objective morality, for instance, is intrinsically related to the question of God.
No, it isn't. Even if there is a God, there is still no objective morality, because there is no objective, non-circular reason why we ought to do what God says.
And I don't know. I know obviously there's hundreds upon hundreds of years of philosophy constructing all this, but as a matter of tying together.
Philosophy has explored this. It's never provided a solution.
A solution to what? Where objective morality comes from? Here's the solution. Objective morality doesn't exist.
Most of the greatest, in fact, almost every single one of the greatest philosophers that ever lived died quite miserable, having failed to answer the very questions that they themselves asked.
I guess I'll die a happy man then. Also, what kind of argument is this? Even if it were true that philosophers died miserable while trying to figure out objective morality, how would that demonstrate that God exists, given that God also doesn't establish that objective morality exists?
Including the Islamic philosophers?
Islam says philosophy has a role in exploring, but it doesn't provide many answers. In fact, the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community,
But that's not the role of philosophy so much.
Sorry?
Either.
Exactly. He says, in terms of postulating that there ought to be a God, philosophy can take us to that.
No, it can't.
But the paperboat of philosophy can never take us to the shore of certainty. It cannot demonstrate that something is.
Yeah, it can. Descartes did that.
That's what Islam says, that it can provide evidence that it is. And that is that, for example, if I want to connect to microwave background radiation or something completely intangible and invisible.
If the CMB were completely invisible, then no instruments would be able to see it.
Well, I need a very specific approach. Right. And if I don't use that approach, I will never, ever be able to detect gamma rays, for example. The more powerful a force, as we go up the series of incredible forces that govern our universe, the more invisible it is to the naked eye.
Not true. If that were the case, the color red would be more difficult to see than infrared, because the color red has more energy than infrared. Blue would be even harder to see.
So how can it be that the force that's behind all those forces should be visible?
What reason do we have to believe that there is a force behind the forces that our eyes and instruments can detect?
And that's why people will say, well, if God exists, show me.
Right.
And I say, okay, well, if your mother loves you, show me. You can't. There's an effect.
That's the irony, right? Yeah. The irony is that the most supreme force in the universe is one that we can't interact with, as you just said.
And that's where,
I know that's not verbatim what you said.
But no, I totally, you're absolutely right in the point that atheists often bring up, but that's where Islam fundamentally and very respectfully disagrees. Islam says you can interact. And if you can't interact, then that's not a God worth even exploring.
Yeah, I agree with
But
that,
Islam says that every single human being, you and I, have been inbuilt with not only the thirst to look for that God, but to actually search for him.
If he wanted to be found, why wouldn't God have given us an inherent knowledge of his existence so that searching isn't even necessary?
And I shouldn't have to get a PhD in astrophysics to know God, or wait until 2022 or 2021 when the James Webb goes up and takes a picture of God. What about all the thousands of people before? Every human being has always had the ability to sincerely pray. It's something as simple as that.
This guy must have a much broader definition of interaction than I do, because I can sincerely pray to anyone and anything. I don't see how that constitutes an interaction. If I sincerely write a letter to Santa Claus, am I interacting with him? To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.